Chapter 11. The Case History of Bartholomew Drag, in which the Grasshopper concludes his counterattack with a second tale involving make-believe. An episode in Drag's early life, Sneak read, set the pattern for everything that was to follow. As a Boy Scout, young Bartholomew was interested almost exclusively in those scouting practices which fall into the good deeds department, and in that department he was especially keen on the good deed which consists in helping old ladies across the street. After a bit, Bartholomew came to value the role of old lady helper, streetwise, at least as much as he did the benefit which performance of that role is presumed to provide for old ladies. He thus took to lurking about the busy intersections of the city where he lived, which, luckily for him, was St. Petersburg, Florida, so that Bartholomew enjoyed a veritable glut of opportunities for performing his service and, more important, his role. But one traumatic day his family moved from St. Petersburg to Doze, a hamlet in the hinterland of the state, where the entire female population was under the age of 45. This was the worst calamity that had ever befallen Bartholomew in his young life, and it might have been too much to bear, except for one saving development. It was decided that Bartholomew's elderly grandmother should come to live with the Drag family in their new house. After the family's removal to Doze, Bartholomew's efforts became concentrated upon getting his grandmother to wish to cross the town's one street. The various artifices Bartholomew employed in accomplishing these arrangements need not concern us in this report. Suffice it to say that Bartholomew was now engaged in playing a two-role, two-person, one-player game of the kind in which the non-playing participant is maneuvered into performing the desired complementary role. But grandmothers are much less easily deceived by small boys than small boys believe, and Grandmother Drag very soon realized what her grandson was up to. She was, however, an especially indulgent grandmother, and so she was willing to humor Bartholomew in his pastime. And so, at this point, Bartholomew was playing a two-role, two-person, one-player game, where the non-playing participant intentionally performed the complementary role out of, we may say, the goodness of her heart. But as often happens in dealing with small boys, this favor was exploited rather than returned, and Bartholomew, since his appetite for the game knew no bounds, very soon became a dreadful bore and nuisance to his grandmother. And so she became much less available for sorties across the street to the public library, the post office, or the candy store, whereupon Bartholomew quickly restored affairs to their original satisfactory condition by producing a bribe. It was unmistakably conveyed to Grandmother Drag that Bartholomew's usual sunny disposition would be replaced by an attitude of sullen bad temper if the grandmotherly excursions fell below a certain level of frequency. The rest of Drag's life, in those particulars which are relevant to his treatment and rehabilitation, consisted of a series of arrangements which were in essence the same kind of arrangement he had achieved between himself and his grandmother. By the time Drag was 35, he had accumulated, as all of us do, a quite extensive repertory of proprietary roles, all the roles, that is, associated with the various social positions he occupied: father, husband, boss. He was owner-director of a computer manufacturing corporation, chairman of the Opera Board and of the Heart Fund, and city councilor, to name just a few of his more obvious positions. And since each of these and similar positions has a number of distinct roles associated with it, Drag was, like the rest of us, called upon to perform many different roles in the ordinary course of events, and many of them he performed, as the rest of us do, largely automatically and unreflectingly. But with respect to a very substantial number of them, Drag assumed a distinctly atypical posture. He treated them just as he had long ago treated the role of helping old ladies across the street. That is to say, he valued performing them at least as much as he valued their social benefits. Among his favorites were understanding father, understanding husband, pig-headed father, pig-headed husband, graciously condescending banterer, typing pool, ditto, assembly line, jocular chairman of the board, gruff chairman of the board, sympathetic confidant, shocked confidant, and many others. And since drag valued these roles not primarily for their social uses, but as vehicles for dramatic performance, there developed a hiatus between drag's performance of the roles and the situations in which they could appropriately be performed. That is, he took to performing them even when this situation did not require it, just as he had done as a Boy Scout. And the other people who happened to be involved in his performances were treated in the way that he had treated his grandmother, that is, as dramatically enabling devices. And at first, just as was the case with his grandmother, the other members of the cast in his little dramas were unintentional and unknowing accomplices, but it soon became clear to them what Drag was doing. Now, Drag was an immensely likable man, and his friends and acquaintances, when they realized that Drag had a kind of quirk, were entirely ready to humor him in what they were prepared to accept as a minor peculiarity in his makeup. But as it had been with Grandmother Drag, the more they humored him by pandering to his eccentricity, the more demanding Drag became of their services. He became, in short, a nuisance and a bore. A senior stenographer in the typing pool would whisper to a junior typist, "Go over to the water cooler and banter with Drag." Or a husband would say to his wife, "I've got to think up some personal problem I can confide to Bart on the golf course tomorrow, or he'll be grumpy all day." Or, "Smith, I'm going to have to muck up your figures on the Jessup Corporation order. I'm sorry, but we'd better give the old man the opportunity to hit the ceiling tomorrow." Finally, things reached a crisis stage with the Robinson affair. "Robinson won't get his promotion, you know." "Why not?" "The old man kept him in his office till midnight last night playing indecisive executive over the Kramer account. Finally, Robinson got fed up and said he had better things to do than play parlor games all night." "Oh, Jesus. What did the old man do?" "Oh, he just whipped out understanding boss in the face of extreme provocation and apologized to Robinson for keeping him so late." "Look, we can't let this kind of thing happen again. Why did Robinson crack, for God's sake?" "Bad scheduling. The day before, he'd had to partner Drag in Uneasy Lies the Head That Wears the Crown, and the day before, he had to pretend that his and Joan's marriage was on the rocks." "We've simply got to get organized. Get Jones in planning to work out a complete schedule for everyone concerned. That includes the gang at the Opera Society, the Heart Fund executive, the city councilors and their staffs, and of course Mrs. Drag and the kids, as well as everyone here in the administration building and at the plant. Have him lay out a day-by-day, a month at a time, including a likely projection of Drag's appointment schedule a month in advance, with indicated possible deviations. Then have him make a sequential projection of Drag's likely role preferences on the basis of his performances over the past year. I know it won't be easy. With 6 alternative roles for each role in the sequence in decreasing order of probability, he'll have to do the best he can. A year from now, we'll have better data and he can make a better projection. Now, when he's done all that, have him make up a list of role assignments and give everyone as many as they think they can handle. We'll have to set up a central dispatching office to get people to the right places at the right times, and Drag's secretary and Mrs. Drag between them can keep central dispatching up to the minute on his location and contacts, okay?" "I'll see to it right away." If we had had this thing going last night, we could have manufactured some excuse for getting Robinson out of there before he cracked. He's no good at indecisive executive anyway. "But if we keep shuffling people around like that, won't the old man get suspicious?" "We'll try to keep it to a minimum, of course, and when it happens, we ought to have a reasonably plausible story. Better have Drag's buddy at the Journal prepare an index of contingency cover stories. But the most important thing is that as long as we keep feeding him role opportunities, he won't pay much attention to what no doubt will, from time to time, develop into a fairly surrealistic sequence of comings and goings." The master plan was created and put into operation within the week. For a full year, it worked like the well-oiled machine it was, and then... "Central dispatching. Master Control here. Suspend all operations until further notice." "What?" "At 1400 hours this date, Bartholomew Drag was admitted to Frolicite Sanatorium for an indefinite period of treatment. Out." 3 months later. Dr. Huishreka. Make yourself comfortable, Mr. Drag. No, not on the couch, please. Take this chair. Drag. Hoy Shreka, huh? You're the fourth one in 3 months, but I suppose you know that. I presume you do talk to each other. I almost added behind my back. Mr. Drag. I know. I realize that's a defense you chaps see through in a second. My pretending to make fun of the fact that I'm paranoid, quite right too. So I'll start at the top and give you the whole story as though you didn't know a thing about my case, just as I did with the others, right? Right. Drag suddenly gets up from his chair, quickly opens a closet door, peers inside, closes the door, and returns to his chair. I have, you see, the completely irrational belief that I am the object of an elaborate conspiracy. I simply cannot rid myself of the ridiculous notion that everyone I know is humoring me in some way, that there is a concerted effort among my business associates, my employees, my friends, even my family, to keep something from me. I imagine that knowing glances are exchanged, and I find myself interpreting overhead scraps of conversation in such a way as to convince myself that people are planning the most extraordinary things about me. Drag empties the wastebasket and examines its interior, and sometimes I fancy that I detect looks of the most extreme exasperation, if not rage, when I seem to catch one of my friends or acquaintances off guard. It is for all the world as though everyone were treating me as a bad-tempered child they were forced to pander to. Drag pulls back a corner of the rug and examines the floor beneath it. But of course, there are just my recent symptoms. You want to hear about my childhood? Well, the first thing I remember— Mr. Drag, please shut up. What's that? What did you say? Do shut up. What the devil are you saying? You must be out of your mind. By God, I don't believe you're a psychologist at all. You don't even know your own role, Mr. Drag. Well, yes, if you want to put it that way, and believe me, I know what your role was supposed to be. I know the drill. I talk and you chaps listen. I think you're a bloody imposter, and I demand to see the director at once. Drill. Bloody. You must have picked up that kind of bluster when you were liaison officer with the RAF. What the devil are you talking about? The role you're playing this very minute. Outraged officer. When someone isn't playing the game. You've even assumed something of an English accent. Did you know that? Oh, I get it now. This is some new kind of shock treatment. Well, fine. If you can jolt me out of my paranoia, more power to you. You are not paranoid, Mr. Drag. Don't be an idiot. You'll have to take my word for it that I am not. Dr. Heuschrecke, who had earlier interviewed the principal officers of the master plan, then told Drag the true facts of the case. Drag responded at first by ably performing the role of a man incapable of articulate utterance. Then he gained sufficient poise to speak. I believe you, Heuschrecke. It's monstrous. I shouldn't be allowed out alone. It must be admitted that you have been something of a trial to your friends and associates. Something of a trial indeed. A bore and a drag. That's my name, and that's my game. But you can cure me, that's the important thing? Or is the only way to protect society from me to clap me in a madhouse? What is wrong with me, anyway? Is it some new kind of mental illness? Mr. Drag, you are not suffering from a mental illness of any kind. Then what on earth is wrong with me? You are suffering from a logical fallacy. Here the dossier ended, and Sneak, smiling broadly, put it down. The next day, he was again ushered into Dr. Heuschrecke's office. Come in, Sneak, come in. Handing Heuschrecke the manila folder. An interesting case. I thought you would find it so. And were you able to effect a cure? If cure can be separated from rehabilitation, then I would say that he was cured, but not yet completely rehabilitated, though the prognosis is good. Of course, you wanted me to read this to persuade me that one can perform proprietary as well as assumed roles in games of make-believe. In part, yes. Are you persuaded? Yes, I think so. In fact, Drag's symptoms seem to be a kind of mirror image of my own. Why do you say that? Well, Perhaps most strikingly, whereas I was engaged at the outset in the deception of other people, in Drag's case, other people were engaged in the deception of him. Quite so. And this points to the basic similarity and also to the basic difference between your case and his. The similarity is that both of you needed situations in which to perform your roles, that is, the performance of other roles responsive to your own. But each of you achieved this enabling condition in opposite ways. You, at least at first, insinuated yourself into already existing situations by adopting, through imposture, one of the roles which went to make up that situation. If the others believed you to be the Queen of England, then they would respond in ways appropriate to the Queen, and thus enable you to continue your performance of Elizabethan roles. Drag, on the other hand, found himself with roles to perform but a scarcity of situations in which to perform them. He therefore performed his roles even when the situation was inappropriate to their performance. You, on the other hand, performed roles when the role was inappropriate to your own identity. You were an imposter, and Drag was a bore, even though your goals were the same, that is, to be performing roles. Yes, that describes it, but how do you account for these quite different approaches? Why, by differences in your backgrounds and, accordingly, in your characters, of course. Drag, after all, was a dedicated Boy Scout. Honesty was his watchword. Deceit was anathema to him. But you were heir precisely to a tradition of professional duplicity. Consequently, when each of you began to achieve that autonomy in your role performances that we have called playing a game, you adopted quite different strategies to accomplish this autonomous condition. Your performances, Sneak, were like stage performances in the respect that you were trying to stimulate responses from an audience, even though an unwitting audience. You could hardly afford, therefore, to bore them. But Drag did not adapt his roles to his audience. On the contrary, he required them to adapt their responses to his roles, and that, of course, explains why people would rather go to the movies than to church, and why charlatans are much more entertaining than honest men. But these considerations, while interesting, are taking us away from the issues that primarily concern us. We are interested not in the different ways in which you and Drag accomplished your purposes, but in the similarity, indeed the identity of those purposes. For you played assumed roles, and Drag played proprietary roles only because each of you thought that role performance had to exploit real-life situations, and thus the real-life temperaments of each of you dictated the kinds of role that you would play. But since make-believe can be a game in which the performance of enabling roles is itself part of the game, the distinction between assumed and proprietary roles is irrelevant. Drag is no more constrained by temperament to be sincere in his roles than you are constrained to be insincere, because in a game of pure make-believe the terms have no force. That distinction is replaced by the distinction between a good and a bad move, that is, between a performance which evokes a response and one which does not. And depending on the game being played, or upon the state of the game at any moment, a role might or might not be true to the character of the person who performs it. But what of it? A game is successful just to the extent that it continues to produce responses, not to the extent that it is sincere or insincere. Both of you are therefore in a position to live down your names. You can play games of this kind without being a sneak, and Bartholomew can play them without being a drag. I am convinced by what you say, Dr. Heuschrecke, but is Drag, I wonder? His personality strikes me as being altogether more rigid than mine. I really don't think that has much to do with the basic facts of the case, Sneak, although you are quite right, of course, in what you say. For it is characteristic of games that quite divergent personality types can engage in the same game. The fact that so-and-so is a belligerent bastard no doubt differently colors the game of hockey in which he plays, but this is much less important than the fact that he is a belligerent hockey player. But as far as Drag is concerned, you can judge for yourself. He is waiting in the anteroom now, I believe. Heuschrecke goes to the door and opens it. Come on, Drag. Come in. Mr. Drag, I'd like you to meet Mr. Sneak. Glad to meet you, Sneak. Heuschrecke has told me something about your case. I trust you don't mind, Sneak. Hardly, Doctor. Since you're bringing us together, I surmise, is in aid of our rehabilitation. Quite right. And the prognosis, gentlemen, is good. It is it? He produces a revolver. Don't make a move, Hosheka. Sit right where you are with your hands on the desk. Drag, I'm not afraid to use this. I want you to get up. Not you, Hosheka. You stay there and walk ahead of me out to the parking lot. There you will get into the driver's seat of the gray Mercedes parked near the hedge. After that, I'll tell you what to do. Very well, but first tell me who you really are. I am Profero Sneak, a retired spy. I just wanted to be sure. And I, so we'll know where we are, am really Sanders of the FBI. Of course you are. Now move, Sanders. Sneak and Drag exit. The prognosis is not good. It's excellent. He flips a switch on the intercom. Please send Mr. Skepticus in. Skepticus enters. Good God, Grasshopper, what are you doing masquerading as a psychiatrist? I am not a psychiatrist. I am a... Yes, I know, a physician of philosophy. But why the disguise? Not a disguise, Skepticus. A nom de guerre. Heuschrecke is German for grasshopper. Oh, even so, what the devil am I doing talking to you? Grasshopper or grasshopper as Heuschrecke, you are still nothing more than a figment of the real grasshopper's imagination. How can I be part of the tale that you are at this very moment telling me? Ah, well, Skepticus, who can tell what tale any of us may or may not be a part of? Metaphysics is not really my line, and in any case, what difference does it make? In the inquiry we are pursuing, it doesn't matter who says what or under what curious circumstances, but only whether what is said is cogent and relevant to the issue. So let us now return to that issue.